When it comes to learning about cinematography, the best thing you can do after making films is watching films. That's why in this series, I look at some of the best and most important films for aspiring cinematographers and really any filmmakers. In the past couple of episodes, I've looked at some stunning classics, breathtaking contemporary and outright beautiful films, and in this video I'll do the same, as well as some I missed and a few animated films, because they are just as important as live action. I also have a letterbox list linked down below with every film I've mentioned over the last 3 videos, but with that out of the way, let's get straight into the movies. Okay, I hear you. The last 2 videos have done pretty well, and with that I've had a lot of comments mentioning films that I've missed. Some I agree with, some I don't, but here are 5 that should have been in the last 2 videos. So to start off, we have Rope, one of my favourite Alfred Hitchcocks, and it's the most famous example of extensive long takes in a film, which is why I can't recommend it enough. It's influenced films like Birdman, 1917 and Boiling Point, all of which I'd recommend as well, but as far as important cinematography techniques go, I'd always say to watch The Pioneer first. Now, someone who I was yet to include was Andrei Tarkovsky, who undoubtedly has had one of the biggest impacts on cinema altogether, and out of his wide filmography, the 2 I'd like to recommend today are Mirror and Stalker, 2 of his better known films but 2 of his most important ones. But why should you watch these? Well, Stalker has some of the most illuminating sci-fi cinematography ever to grace the silver screen, and Mirror is almost the opposite. I'd almost describe it in the Barry Lyndon style of elegant cinematography. Both are incredibly important watches and ones that shouldn't go amiss. Come and See is possibly the most horrifying film I've ever seen, and the cinematography itself plays a huge part in why it's so distressing to watch. It's pure, raw, you can't wait for it to end, but you also can't take your eyes away. Maybe read what it's about first, but if you do decide to give it a watch, I can't recommend it enough, although I definitely have something light-hearted lined up like Wall-E, Monsters Inc. or Satan Tango to watch after. On a more positive note, Ran by Kurosawa. Now, I did mention Seven Samurai in the last video, but there are just some directors who have multiple films that you need to watch, and some where their entire filmography is a film school. As for Ran, my mind instantly goes to the use of colour. It's vibrant, gives certain meaning, and overall feels like one of the most epic uses of it of all time. In these videos, I always like to include some newer films, as whilst older ones do have this certain charm, the times are changing, and we do need to look towards more contemporary films and see what we can learn from their cinematography. Starting off, The Green Mile. It's one of the most heartbreaking films I've ever seen, but the cinematography was something that just added an inconceivable amount of depth to the film. It made us feel observant, but it also put us into the shoes of John when necessary. Not only is this a film where you'll learn a lot from a cinematography standpoint, but also one that's just good for filmmaking in general. One of my favourite examples of cinema verite is the Safdie brothers' Daddy Longlegs. I love it because it shows what you can do on a shoestring budget, the cinematography has an incredible amount of depth and again adds a lot to the storytelling, and it shows their unique style really early on. If you like any of their other films, I truly can't recommend it enough. I've been wanting to include Ida on one of these lists for a while, as each shot simply blew me away. I can't really put into words why, but the stark black and white paired with the 4x3 is something that every aspiring cinematographer can learn something from. Sure, I could have included an older film that's more reputable, but it's the modern age, and I think as much as we do need to learn from the classics, we need to learn from contemporary too, especially when they're shot in the same style. Parasite was the most popular film of 2019, and for very, very good reason. The story is undoubtedly one of the most engaging we've had in years, it's original, has us on the edge of our seat, but also laughing. However, it was also a film where the mainstream audience noted how good the cinematography was, notably in the composition and colour, but also a lot more. However, this is a film where I really want to go in depth, so if you would like to see a video all about the cinematography, let me know below. To end this section, I wanted to touch on Come On Come On, which is a film you probably weren't expecting me to mention. Now, I'm sure I'll get a ton of comments recommending a better film to put in place of this, but personally, there isn't one. Robbie Ryan is one of the best cinematographers working today, and his latest film, Come On Come On, shows him at his best. His style of filmmaking is one to be admired, and whilst I love some of his other films, most of them actually, this one holds a special place. Something I haven't touched much on in this series is animation. In the first video I looked at Fantasia, but I didn't really go further, and there is such an incredible amount to learn. Now, I didn't include films like Ratatouille and Toy Story, as I'm sure you've already seen them, but if you haven't, definitely check them out. Starting out though, anything by Miyazaki, more specifically today, Spirited Away. Now I could have picked any one of his films for this section, but I watched Spirited Away a lot growing up, and it's the one ingrained in my head. The art style from this film is something special though. Sure, there are other films from other directors and animators with the same look, but like with Rope, nothing beats the original. You really can't go wrong with any Miyazaki, but this is definitely a good one to start on. I'm trying to include a good range of animation styles here, but I just had to include two of this kind. The Nightmare Before Christmas is not only one of my favourite Christmas films of all time, and yes, I think it's a Christmas film, but also one of my favourite stop motion animation, and that's the style that I think cinematographers can learn the most from. Not in the way you think though, it's Henry Selick and Tim Burton, we all know and love their style, but it's the absurdity of the style that I think we can take note of. Don't be afraid to try something out of the ordinary, because it might just become your signature. I do have a video all about The Nightmare Before Christmas coming out later this month though, so I'll leave it there. Following that, we have Fantastic Mr. Fox, widely recognised as one of the best stop motion animations of all time. Now if we look past the star-studded cast and famous story, we have a beautiful animation that rivals the cinematography of some of the live action films I've mentioned today. It's a masterclass within itself and absolutely flies by, so if you haven't already seen it, you're missing out. Loving Vincent is probably the most hallucinatory film I'll ever mention in this series. Every one of the 65,000 frames was painted on over 1,000 different canvases, and with a production time of over 6 years, it's the longest production of a film I'll mention today. Now I'm not saying you need to go and spend 6 years to make a movie, in fact, the opposite. There's a lot to learn from a film like this. My favourite lesson, however, is that you should be taking the time to compose a shot, and if you like it, leave it there for a few more seconds. Depending on the genre, we're in no rush, and if the audience needs a breather, or even if it just feels right, you can hover over the cut button for a couple more seconds. And last, but definitely not least, we have The Breadwinner. This is easily one of the best animations I've ever seen. The story is completely heartbreaking, the voice acting is superb, and the animation itself is beautiful to watch. The animation style blends a fairy tale look with a distinct cut-out approach, and whilst I feel as though I've seen it before, it is still a unique and fresh take in the world of animation. It invokes a magical feeling in the dark world of our characters, and I feel like any cinematographer, aspiring or established, has something to learn from this. But that's it for this episode. I don't know how many more videos I'll be able to do regarding this topic, but I do know I want to make it more accessible to people. So I really don't want it to feel out of reach for people to finish the recommendations I give. But on that note, if you do have anything you'd like to see in the next and possibly final video, let me know below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. You know, so if you did have a recommendation for an analysis, leave them below. Thanks so much for watching. Maybe we'll see you next time. Bye.